This is TWiT.
Now we're going to talk about something special. Normally, the bites are when we take a particular news story, tell you about it, and then dig in a bit. But this time, we're going to talk about an event that happened a couple of weeks ago. I was at the BlackHat and DEF CON conferences live and in person this year, as opposed to last year, which was purely virtual. So what was it like? What did I hear? What was going on? First, about the conferences themselves. Both of these were what the organizers call hybrid conferences. That means that while there was an in-person component, now that's both the conference and the exhibit floor, there was also an online component so that people who could not or didn't want to travel didn't have to. In talking with show management, both of the conferences considered this hybrid approach to be really successful. And while I have no particular insight on these, I will say I think it is highly likely that future conferences of this type will be hybrid. The last couple of years have shown the show organizers that they don't have to worry about the online conference cannibalizing the in-person event, making people not want to come. And that was really the next thing that I was going to talk about, the fact that people really did want to meet face-to-face. It was almost a palpable craving that people had to be in person once again. Now, this is very understandable. It's also the source of some danger, because it means in one instance that people, if we do get another variant that forces the public health officials to say we should be locked down, people are going to be very reluctant to do that. People want the human face-to-face contact. It has also opened up another attack vector for social engineering attacks, because in the same way that people want to be really rich and they want to feel like they're powerful and they want to feel like they're helping their company or their customers, they really, really want to be face-to-face with other human beings, even if both of those faces have masks on them. And at both of the conferences, all of the faces did have masks on them. Both conference organizers said that these were fully masked events. For those of you keeping score, the employees and staff at casinos, restaurants, bars, etc. in Las Vegas were also fully masked. That is by order of their health department. So with that about the conferences, what did I see there? Because normally, of course, we're talking about all the new technologies, the new trends, the various, phases of technology sweep going on. So what were we talking about? Here's the thing that people weren't really talking about. That's ransomware. Why were people not talking about ransomware? I think a big part of it is that ransomware is now right up there with something like a sin flood. It's just part of the environment. People assume that there are going to be ransomware payloads in email messages coming to their organization every single day. They assume that there are going to be ransomware payloads attached to URLs on sketchy websites every single day. So what they're doing is using automated means to try and guard against those attack vectors, while they spend most of their time helping employees recognize and respond appropriately to the sorts of URLs, attached files, etc., that might come to them in spear phishing campaigns. So one of the traits was education and awareness. Talked to a number of companies that are heavily into the awareness and training spaces, and they are seeing a huge uptake in business. Some of this is related to the fact that more employees are working from home. Some of it is related to the fact that the IT department and security groups are recognizing that they must have trained, aware employees as one of the first lines of defense. One of the other things that we found out is that, just as in the case of wearing a mask, it's not necessarily because it protects you, but it's protecting everybody else, because both immunology and IT security aren't just about you anymore. You're part of an ecosystem. You're part of a supply chain. In fact, you're probably, as an organization, in the middle of a supply chain. You have all of your suppliers going off one side and all of your customers and partners going off the other. In the middle is where you sit. Now, you want to do what you can to do your due diligence and make sure that your suppliers, your partners, are all as secure as they can be. And that means doing things like third-party security checks, third-party risk assessments. Risk assessments are growing. You're hearing about them much more often because they put security in the language of the boardroom, risk factors, and ultimately dollars. But you have to be prepared for your customers and your partners to have the same sort of very pointed, difficult conversations with you that you're having with your suppliers and your partners. No one is alone anymore in the cybersecurity world. It's all part of a chain. So preparing people to be part of the security team through awareness training, third-party security. Those are two big things. And one of the third that I like to talk about, over the past 2 or 3 years, we've heard a lot of people say that the perimeter is dead. There is no more perimeter. I think they're wrong. Perimeter still exists, but the perimeter is an abstraction layer. Just as cloud computing doesn't do away with servers, it merely turns the compute into an abstraction layer that goes after the functions and the services provided by the servers. So the perimeter still exists, is still very real, but it is an abstraction layer rather than something that's defined by physical walls and a firewall. And the sooner IT departments learn that the perimeter hasn't gone, that it's just abstract, the safer they'll be. Now, I want to bring my co-host in to get their take on some of these. And Oliver, since you're the new guy on the panel, I'm going to go to you first.
Awesome.
Are any of these things that you've heard about? I mean, are you hearing about supply chain security? Are you hearing about the shifting definitions of perimeter? What are you hearing from where you sit?
The last ransomware discussion I had was actually with Microsoft, and it sounded a little bit like the proverbial bovine excrement. My last deal with them was obviously Windows 365. So that's the new darling. Everybody wants to do desktop as a service because it theoretically solves all your hybrid work problems. And the line the guy gave me, it's not part of their official messaging, but he put it out there. Your security on a Win 365 desktop is going to be improved against certain attacks, including ransomware. And again, I'm not a coder, but like you said, it's still a desktop. It's at an abstracted layer. I forget whether that's 4, 5, or 6, but it's definitely up there. However, the entire network, that's what they don't tell you about Win 365, unless you're, an individual, you're building a software-defined network to run those things. So maybe Brian knows. I can actually kick this off to Brian. In my mind, theoretically, some Yahoo clicks on the wrong link inside a Windows 365 desktop, you can still get hit by ransomware. No?
Oh yeah, and it's the virtual network, but it's still a network, and other problems is a lot of these virtual networks default to what's called promiscuous mode. So it can listen and hear all kinds of things. And they do that for monitoring, which is all fine and good, but that is a risk factor. So anyway, my bottom line on this is it might be virtual, but it's still a computer. Remember that old meme that was going around? The cloud is really someone else's computer. That's what you've got to keep telling yourself that.
Exactly.
It's just someone else's computer.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So, yeah, so there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of people throwing out market speak, but I'm sorry, it's just someone else's computer, and we need to use the same kind of rules, the same kind of common sense that doesn't seem to exist anymore. And no matter how good we do things, someone clicking on the wrong email still can bypass an awful lot of security.
Yeah.
You're right. That notion that human beings are a critical part of security can't be overlooked. It seems like the last decade we have spent a lot of time, effort, and most of all money trying to come up with ways to work around the human part of security. And the fact is we can't. You cannot simply ignore. There is no level of zero trust. There is no level of authentication numbers. There is no technology that will allow a user, an employee, to go clicking on everything that they get, opening every file that comes to their desktop, and leaving the enterprise completely secure. It just isn't possible. So I think that one of the things we're going to be talking about over the next year or so is that human factor. We're going to see many more people talking about the training. We're going to see many more people talking about incorporating user behavior into their security. Speaking of behavior, that's an authentication factor that we're hearing more and more about. Behavioral authentication is something that seeks to minimize the friction for the legitimate users while keeping the friction high for the potential attackers. It's all interesting. It's all going to continue, and I'm looking forward to bringing the TWiT Riot more from in-person events in the future. I've got another one I'm going to in September, something called IWCE about emergency and critical infrastructure communication. We'll be talking about that, and it'll be interesting to see whether I'm heading off to BlackHat Europe in a few months. One way or the other, there's going to be plenty to talk about. Look forward to talking about it with you.